dear souls and elemental beings out there. This is Jenny Solaria Delfini with a truly special video for you. And yes, I'm very excited. I've spent a really long time writing about incarnated beings from other worlds and dimensions, elementals and mythical creatures living among us in human bodies, struggling with their existence, all just to help humanity evolve. Yes, and also to awaken those of their kind trapped in human bodies. The longer they stay in this matrix, the more they forget where they came from. I've seen and studied these beings for many years, since childhood, in nature and in human form, like my clients. Family and friends, it's fascinating to meet them, and I want to help elemental beings remember their origins, especially with upcoming events. It also relates to a little boy who made me so happy because I hadn't seen a child so curious about who we are. He was so open, and I do this with joy. When people truly want to know, I'm ready to give everything. This hasn't happened often in recent years, especially not with children. They're so influenced by the matrix and their parents' issues. It's a joy for me to start now. I'll begin describing the traits and characteristics. The most important ones I could summarize for hours, but my hands hurt. And I believe you don't have endless time either. I'll start with goblins. You recognize goblins in human form by their appearance. They look cozy and are very easygoing. They have funny bodies, potato-like or pear-shaped. The women are often busty, easygoing, and humorous. They're earthy and strong, with a hearty appetite. They prefer natural materials in their homes. They love wooden houses, brown, green, and orange colors. They adore trees and have a weakness for gems and gold. Anything that sparkles drives goblins crazy. They're also very temperamental and fiercely protective of their families. Yes, they're energetic when needed. They're connoisseurs with all their senses. They love everything related to enjoyment. You might even picture it. They long for love and joy among people. They want to bring joy, whether through jokes or pranks. Their homes often resemble hobbit houses from movies. I've noticed their hairstyles, especially men's, remind me of hedgehogs, rodents, beavers, mice, and hamsters, sometimes squirrels, but that can lean towards elves. Goblins are skilled craftsmen. You'll find them as blacksmiths, carpenters, masons, and builders. They're all-around handymen, caring for their homes. They prefer working on their own homes all day, but they'll work for others for money. They often have round, cozy bellies. They're hard to miss. Sometimes they're big, boastful, and show off, but some have good hearts. They give their all. You see sweat on their foreheads from the slightest effort. They love to exert themselves. Few have full health, losing energy with every task on Earth more than other elementals. They need more rest, quiet, grounding, family, cozy fires, warm ovens, and good food. Their hearts often suffer health issues. Heart and lungs are their weak points. Their knobby hands and feet, red cheeks, smiles, and joy can warm your heart. Though I didn't mention negative traits, some goblins are liars. Be cautious, as there are many tricksters among them. But if you don't break their hearts or enslave them, they're very good people. Now, let's move on to dolphins. They're rare, while goblins are common. Every third elemental is a goblin. Dolphins appear maybe once in 1,000. Let's start. Dolphins' favorite color is bright turquoise. They're lively daredevils, hard to control. As kids, they're always moving, playing pranks, and are athletes. They need physical activity in every way. And of course, they love swimming. They're often seen in swimming championships. They're water lovers or synchronized swimmers. Their bodies smell like fish when wet, triggering memories of their dolphin form. They often have foot issues because they usually have fins. Their feet move in sync. As babies, they crawl for a long time. Crawling is their main movement. In youth, they have athletic bodies. They're smart, agile, and don't need much for health. They have energy for two. They have diverse traits and a love for adventure and freedom. They love deeply and have strong personalities. You can't mistake them for anyone else. Once you meet one, you won't forget. You'll always remember their name. They're strong, trustworthy, and constantly save souls in need. Imagine them rescuing in water, but they do it on land too. They always want to help. And their aura shines so brightly that you just have to love them. They are beautiful people and they spread, which is also a very important trait, constant good cheer, no matter what the weather is or what has just been done to them. They are always optimistic, always looking forward, and do everything for their and our freedom. Yes, so I think dolphins play a very, very important role, different from others. They bring movement into your life. When you deal with a dolphin, everything starts rolling. Yes, whether they do it consciously or not, it's in their aura. And that's why, yes, you can trust them. Well, let's move on to the next ones. They're relatively rare and among all elementals, very heavy. Very melancholic beings. They are the paladin knights. You recognize them by a very, very special trait that hardly any other being has. They are also called gentlemen in this scene, always polite, conscious, calm. So they know how to behave towards women and are very helpful. They are the ones who still open the door for women or go to the other side of the car door to let you in. They are enormously centered, always observing the overall happenings, always, of course, in the sense of protection for their woman or their family. They also wear an astral protective armor in gold and sparkling, and they are very, very bright. Their aura is yellow gold because of this. And they have a specially chosen or created weapon. So when I've seen them then, there are not only those with swords, there are different ones. There are spears, very interesting weapons. And they also have a strong inclination towards martial arts physically, are extremely good and quick in learning as if they had already learned it. Accordingly, of course, also toy weapons in childhood or PC games where shooting is involved. They are always at the forefront. When it comes to defending and protecting the primal feminine principle, you will attract paladins. That's just how it is. They would give their lives in honor and pride without thinking a bit about themselves. They are truly real astral and physical bodyguards. You also find them in this industry, also with security or security people. They are often there if they don't do it for the money, but actually do this job with body and soul. Yes, and what's noticeable is that their soul really lies in deep, deep hidden places. You can't just read their aura and say, hey, you're doing well today or what. They simply don't let you look inside them. They like to open up when they trust someone, but that's rare. They also rarely show feelings, although they feel deeply and are very, very sensitive. But they always want to have it under control and also make sure that no one sees when they feel something. And what's noticeable is that often in childhood, the liveliness is missing in the paladins. And this, what you are actually used to from children, this exuberant joy and this craziness and error doing things, they don't do that. They think very carefully about what they will do next and also don't understand all these exuberant, crazy children because you have to pull yourself together a bit. So they are very serious, but they actually miss movement in some form. That's why paladins and dolphins actually offer a good combination because they can give each other something the other doesn't have. Yes, and it is indeed their special mission and their task, the greatest meaning of their life, to protect and observe the primal feminine principle. They really get along well with almost every person, as long as they consider them sincere and honest. But they can also coldly dismiss dark people who are severely evil and not give them a glance. And if you look at their life, they basically let in at most 1 or 2 real people seriously, so they would open up for them. They let no one get close to them. They only trust themselves. That's a very important point. No matter how convincing you are, it will be tested over decades, what you said. Besides, they are very intelligent, and where I've often seen them as lawyers, judges also, yes. And yes, they often find themselves, and that's one of the sad traits because they simply don't need it, but I've often seen paladin knights under hierarchical relationship conditions where they are oppressed by women, by sorceresses, or by goblins who have swung the cooking spoon behind them, and they don't need that at all. But they do it because they don't choose and say, yes, you are now worth being protected. They simply protect every form of femininity, no matter how malicious it is. Yes. And that's one of, yes, a sad story. Maybe the listening paladin can really observe better with an objective eye to whom he gives his energy. That's very important. And now we come to the next elemental being, I say in the form, I haven't found another name for them, but they are noticeably present. In society, you find them regularly, whether it was in the classroom or at the workplace. 2001, the so-called magicians. Yes, and many will listen to me and you might also recognize yourself. So you recognize the magicians by the fact that they read everything from women's eyes. They present themselves to us as manipulative and standing above the world, and they like to pretend to us that they are free from fear. But they are not. They are even more afraid of the dark than we are. What's also noticeable is that they get everything they wish for in their life, from women over money, over support, over donations, everything. The world literally lies at their feet, and they are the so-called 2001 lucky ones, if you want to see it that way. You always wonder how they do it with them. It works, and you do the same, and it doesn't work. That's because they work with magic and, of course, have their helper rails. And what I've also noticed, which has often annoyed me, is that they manage to get out of every situation. You just can't get hold of them and say that you want to discuss this and that with them. They always find an excuse. 2001. And yes, so it's unbelievable. Besides, they love groups. You really find them regularly in groups that form. Often they are the ones who form the groups because they can entertain these groups because they like to hear themselves talk, swing, and they even love themselves. They really feel love when they say great things. They spend a lot of time with groups. They invest a lot and always want to be among people. In general, they love the big appearance. And how you can recognize them? Well, when you look into their eyes, they actually sparkle like there's an extra lamp built in, so flash sparkle, which disappears when they lay down their magician abilities. But you can see that magic is at work, and of course magicians have a preference for stars, fire and magic. They are interested in magical rituals from a young age. And when they can simply communicate exceptionally well. They often speak pompously and without real meaning, but when you listen to them, you don't even notice it because they can really captivate you with what they say. They are simply brilliant at producing hot air. You listen to them as if lived. You also hear that they even draw loops in what they say. And you think, okay, he has already said that twice and 3 times, but you can't get away. You also can't say, hey, are you crazy? Why are you telling this for the 3rd time? You just have to be nice, yes. They use a certain magic on the listeners. And yes, often I have discovered in their aura a so-called magician's cloak, where they have installed many reflections and you see yourself in their aura, which is why you are totally in love and also feel attracted. They simply have a very, very intense enchantment strategy and energy about them. And you see things in them that they are not at all. Yes, when they are once weak or not doing well, you often see when the magician's cloak crumbles a bit what's really inside. And that's something very, very small. Yes. Why, as if you take the air out? Yes. And yes, it's just not so easy to get out of their spell. Often they possess people for a lifetime. And the interesting thing is I've met many magicians personally because magicians themselves are very, very lonely people when you get them to be open and honest with you. And the interesting thing was also that when I observed it, magicians among magicians, and this is different from other elemental beings, they can't stand each other. They even hate and fight other magicians as if they were their worst enemy. I mean, what species does that? They also can't allow any love because they are ashamed of it. So they are ashamed after all they've done to receive true love. They can even get sick if you tell them I love you very bluntly. So be careful with true love. You can't lure them with it. They have to genuinely want it from within. And then they can, of course, but they start from scratch. They are very, very weak beings. Yes, and I've still experienced it, I must say at this point, that a magician has shed his magician's cloak and reflections because he was fed up with this huge spectacle. And they then bravely fight for access to their soul. And they seem so small and weak that you can really feel sorry for them. And yes, finally, sometimes a fairy manages to open her heart and regain trust in these magicians in love, that they truly follow love again. And I believe that's also the goal of many elemental beings. Yes, then we come straight to the fairies. And they are very special beings, also very rare. Still, they appear regularly, but they are noticeable. They are really such striking beings that they just are. They are beautiful women with strong charisma, but without taking up space or wanting to consciously stand in the foreground in any way. They just do it. If you have a fairy in the room, no one can turn their head away from her. You always have to look there, no matter what she does, what she touches. 2001, it's just incredible. They are often graceful, charming, and very, very loving beings. Often they actually appear calm in their aura as if they were enchanting you and like a queen, and their walk and every movement also resembles a princess. Just the way she is. And you can remind her a bit that her little finger always sticks out when she holds a glass of water. They hate violence or when they eat. They also hate experiencing violence or being in a violent scene, and then often try to harmonize such situations with their soothing and calming voices. And they actually not only have this fine manner, they also actually have power and can even confront dark beings and actually eliminate them. Many fairies are not aware of this, but they even stand far above the magicians in abilities. Furthermore, they can be very, very heartwarming and extremely empathetic with their fellow humans. They even perceive the feelings of their fellow humans extremely strongly. They especially love it, and you can see it when the fairies interact with small children and babies or with animals. So you see the fairies in these areas, children, babies, animals, the sick and needy, because they can truly enable miracles. And their heart is literally on their tongue. The problem with the fairies is their own heart. They actually find it difficult their whole life to stand up for themselves. They spend their whole life just serving and forget themselves in the process. It becomes totally dangerous for a fairy when she has fallen in love. And the worst part comes now. They have a weakness for magicians. A fairy can truly only fall in love once in her life. If she doesn't manage to open the heart of her prince, probably a magician, which is already the most difficult case. Yes, she could really hope for other elemental beings, but no, she wants the magician. If she doesn't manage to open their heart, then what can I say? She loses all her abilities and she basically dies. And she doesn't give up on them either. She waits for decades for the magician, allows herself to be humiliated, fooled because she just doesn't give up. Because then she would give up hoping that it might still somehow succeed. Then she knows she will die. So she can no longer return to where she came from. She has then broken forever and ever. The heart and soul lose these feathers. And yes, that's the problem with the fairies. They love with skin and hair, not just with their hearts. They love with their whole being in all dimensions, because they also need this strength to do it for the magician. Therefore, as I have observed, a fairy never voluntarily leaves her magician, her tormentor, who can really break her. And that's also a strength of the fairy. She just doesn't give up. And she's always optimistic that it will still come someday. But if a fairy then actually has this broken heart and her abilities are gone, and yes, her soul goes away, then something terrible happens. Then she can become this so-called evil 13th fairy and, yes, become an evil witch. So she can actually curse and fall very, very dark and far, far down into the lower astral plane, because she has already lost everything. She just becomes the same, only she falls into the dark side. A good example, although in the fairy tale or also in this film, it's not about a fairy, but you can see a bit in the film The Little Mermaid, also Ariel, that these fish beings make a deal with the darkness, and then the deal is that she must get the love of the human prince from him. And if that doesn't succeed, then she loses her voice, so her soul. And it's somewhat similar with the fairies. They have slipped into such a body with a deal, often out of love for a magician they have seen from another dimension in the third dimension. Yes, and finally, maybe about the fairies. If the fairies really come back to their powers and believe in themselves and, yes, would take up their abilities and all come together in this world, then we could change it within 24 hours. Because fairies can perform miracles when they focus on something. And you have surely encountered a fairy before, and she's available in every room and at every time. There we have already stumbled over the mermaids. So I will deliver a huge report about the mermaids, who also do not occur very often, but regularly, and everyone should have encountered one at some point. The mermaids are so-called power women, often entire immanences and highly oriented towards women's rights. They are basically also warriors of their kind. But the crazy thing is that they are simultaneously hypersensitive and so sensitive that you can hardly believe it. And what is very noticeable is that they want to be conquered by a man, they want to be the one and only for a man, and they want to be loved with skin and hair, and nothing should be placed above them, and they want to be the only one for him. Dare him, he has others, then they can kill. That's actually true. They actually also have an enormous amount to offer this man. And they know, that's the crazy thing about the men, women, they know their worth, they know they are simply the most amazing beings and that there is no stronger one. Especially also in the physical body, they can handle very well. They have a very good grounding, and they also have, as far as their life force and energy are concerned, they are out of competition. Also, what they can offer the man, they can really carry and save him over the stormy sea 2001 of this matrix, and expect that unconditionally from the other side. And the way they love is highly passionate, as strong as a roaring sea and its waves. That's how strongly they love. But their biggest problem is 2001, that there are hardly any men who can endure that. Hardly any man, due to societal conditioning, still exists who can give his heart. Often the fairy tale women are deeply unhappy their whole lives, chasing after men, and they really attract men in their tragedy who cannot open their hearts. I don't understand why it is like this 2001, but it is their task to open these men's hearts. But very few manage that. So because the men and women attract, and this is now a very distinctive sign if you should be one, yes, you always attract men who love their mom and live with their mom, even at 40. 2001, when more virgins fall into heartbreak and then actually turn away from the dream man out of wounded pride and honor, their heartbreak is as heavy as 100 days of rain. Yes, they are extremely melancholic, longing always and every evening looking at the stars. Their belief in true love keeps them alive, although they mostly, and this is the sad part, remain lonely their whole lives because they are really not compatible with this world. So what would really be important now? The merman would actually be the only beings who could hold them in terms of strength and energetic power. The problem with the mermen is that the 2001, they are just so vain and selfish. And they are actually among the most beautiful men on this planet. And the worst part is they know it too. And it just adds to their suffering. So with these men, in this suffering they have, in this beauty they also have, and in this perfection they are, there is simply not the perfect woman. They actually have an enormous number of women. There are hardly any men who have more women turnover than the mermen. The problem is they are looking for this perfect woman in all their affairs. And with each one they push away, they become more dissatisfied. They get really frustrated with age. They say, isn't there a reasonable one out there? Yes, and they would. That's just something for the mermen. No mountain is too high for them, no wave too big. They would do anything for their woman, for perfection. And where you can find more mermen is, of course, clearly among the surfers. They are often there with other fish beings and dolphins. You see them there too, so dolphins and humans. Noticeable about the mermen is they are really desired by everyone. And they are often successful surf instructors or divers. And the sport and love with the water, connecting with the water goes, and they just do it, goes beyond the love for their woman. So mermen and women don't match. It just doesn't work. So here we are at this drama and suffering path of the mermaid. Once again, very briefly back. The eternal search for their Romeo, the sad... Juliet is a dramatic... Eternal, yes. Up and down. So they also pass each other by, the mermen and the mermaids. The mermen and the mermaids, yes, they just don't see each other. I don't understand that. They are perfectly made for each other. Yes, and what the fairy tale women are still, that's important for me to say at the end, they are enormously critical, intelligent and clear. They see through magicians or certain situations within minutes. And they are always ready for battle, verbally as well as physically. They also have hair on their teeth. And I really don't want to mess with them because the problem with the mermaids 2001, they are always right. So actually, really, they are really right. They are really good. Let's move on to the next, the whales. Whales are gentle beings, peaceful, calm, balanced, and quiet as it is on the water. Their mind rests no matter if it's storming or snowing outside. And interesting about the whales, they also have a weakness for magicians or high priests and priestesses, so the really, really intense stuff. Because the whales think they are the only ones who can bring these dark beings back to their senses. And they often sacrifice their whole life and their love for these. Yes, trapped in magic. They let themselves, and I often have to observe this, really be pushed around, indoctrinated. And they especially notice that they are being manipulated. They are not stupid. The whales are incredibly intelligent beings. They carry the library of the earth with them. All morphogenetic fields are linked to the bodies of the whales. So when they are often writers or can extract information from the field very well. But when it comes to their own drama, they don't do that. So just for the general public, for the common good, but not for themselves. And the interesting thing is, when they are manipulated and they see it, which is easy for them to notice, it doesn't even bother them. For them, it's cheap chatter, and they just don't take this magic seriously. I mean, that's one way to deal with it, but it really annoys me when I think about it. I mean, talk about it. How can you allow something like that, yes? So they just generally don't take anything personally. Wouldn't you think so? You can yell at them, hit them on the shoulder, on the chest, and you just get a smile from them. Yes. So for that, their ego is just totally weakly developed. So they love themselves, of course, but their service to humanity stands above this self-worth. Whales naturally love nature, also the mountains and the vastness, also the sea. The important thing is just that they have space. And what I've noticed is they communicate with their fellow humans telepathically and really work on a mental level, always with their forehead. It's always active, there's always energy and... Yes, they open their mouth, or actually they often forget to talk to you too. Yes, it really takes them to open their mouth, and you really have to force them. But for that, they carry their family, if they manage to start one, and their partners really through the apocalypse, but not in a warlike way, but as if they were swimming or diving, submerging, yes. So very, very, very special beings. So we come to the earth dragons or dragon beings. There are different types also in their nature. And a short summary of that I have here for you. They are very smart, cunning, intelligent, but also very wise beings. They stand, I really noticed, in the spotlight and are classic celebrities, advisors to big names, great healers, wizards, or also stars, politicians, big entrepreneurs. Yes, they just have a knack for money, fame, and you really find them on the very top world stage. Yes, among the stars and starlets. If you ever look into a stretch limo, there's definitely a dragon sitting in there. They also know this has to do with their wisdom and insight. They can handle this matrix very, very well. They are well compatible. They know exactly what their fans want to hear. So they can completely adjust the way they speak to their audience because they read their thoughts, they overlook astrally where they live. Also large stretches of land, huge areas, landscapes, and have a weakness for high, rugged mountains when they are young. And the men among them, they love to climb or hike. Caves really attract them. They definitely like to be in stalactite caves. And yes, their heart, I noticed. So there are such and such. So there are either those where the heart is totally cold or the heart is too soft to bear. Truly happy. So both 2021, I don't know how to say it. Either their heart is too cold or too soft for them to feel happiness. So they always have to imagine it. It always has to fit into their world. Then they endure it here. And what dragons also do, they are often wisdom teachers 2001 and they see through the matrix relatively quickly and also at a young age. They do their own thing. And dragons always stand by their family. They guard everything within their family. They are often found in multiple births or large families. Also interesting because earth dragons often split astrally into different bodies, into siblings. So they are often inseparable because astrally viewed, they are the same being. Yes, this is also the case with twins. Yes, and they are often draconic bloodlines, which makes it hard for them to return to the good side. The female earth dragons are often harmless, contrary to what I just said. They move gracefully like queens and are not quite at the forefront. They are more like family people and protect this dragon family or nature, mountain landscapes, and are often very, very strongly bound to their land astrally, especially to the earth, to protect it. Their main task is to ensure that certain beings do not gain the upper hand in certain areas. What earth dragons have to deal with the most are vampires. 1,000. They go after men, yes, so what sometimes happens in the air. They fight because they hate earth dragons like the plague, vampires. Yes. Well, that's the most important thing about the earth dragons. Let's move on to the werewolves. Notable about the werewolves who actually have a gray aura astrally, like a gray wolf or white aura too. So gray-white, like yes, they love their wolf pack above all. Not in the way you might know with the heart or like it is with goblins, but also, yes, in a wolf-like way. Physically, they do everything for their family, yes, whether they hear a thank you or not. They are on the hunt all day for this family, for this pack, also in protection mode for their females and of course all offspring. It's a kind of honor. So how should I say they do it out of their sense of honor, not out of love for the pack, but from their alpha animal mind. They are still extremely diligent, very cozy, and yet they have noticeably many animal behaviors compared to all other elemental beings, which you would usually find more in dogs. Yes, they really do have behaviors like dogs, who also love to sacrifice themselves for their owner. Although werewolves are also smart, and that's also said about wolves. So order and cleanliness are not their strengths, but they don't let themselves go completely. They just do the bare minimum for themselves. Then they just take their 10-minute shower. The problem with werewolves is the matrix and its temptation. And what really stands out about werewolves is simply for the female world, you often see them also with 1,000 easily available women. You often see werewolves because they love very dear animalistic sex. That makes them happiest. That's how you can recognize them well. And what's really noticeable are the sounds of the werewolves, which resemble howling more than yodeling. Yes, their voices are often also monotonous, like deep thundering, like in Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf. But the wolves actually there's this beautiful movie, Dances with Wolves. They love the fire, nature, the wilderness, and adventure. It's really exciting with the wolves. They all have such special eyebrows, like 1,000 tufts going away, and their feet are strongly grounded. They have feet as hard as hooves. That's how strong wolves are. Nature really does them good, but they love to eat indulgently. So if you want to catch a werewolf, make him good food. And that's simply always their weakness. Yes, they have little sense of aesthetics. 2001 are, however, enormously athletic, nimble, agile, also in martial arts. That's very much in their nature because, as I said, they want to defend the pack. They are usually loyal if the partner endures their moods and submits to them, which can look reversed from the outside. People often think the partner is the strong one, but in reality the werewolf has the pack under control. So they don't let you see their cards. What they are good at is actually being able to be lonely and alone sometimes. They love the moon, the stars, the storm, and the forces of nature. This also has to do with this adventure, this excitement, and the animalistic instincts they constantly deal with. But they also rarely hold on to anything. Once they've decided not to do something anymore, you can't persuade them to come back or do certain things. They are basically also character drifters and gypsies. And they don't hold on to houses they've built or anything. Basically, this sounds really funny now, but with a bag and thin clothing, you can drop them off in the forest and they'll be satisfied, as long as they can sleep comfortably in the corner. What they don't like so much is actual water, and they love having dirty feet. Basically like an eternal child that wants to play. The wolf women are a bit different from the wolf men. They are just as attractive as the wolf men, already 2,000, 1,000, but exactly the opposite, less devoted to their pack. They are often actually easily available women. They want to be conquered and have many love affairs and men, and are also looking for deep love. But the children and the household, that all runs on the side. So if you look into the household and the kitchen, it's a disaster with the wolf women. They actually have a tendency towards being a mess, so that's really big. And it's best to hire a cleaning lady. That's very important. On the outside, when you see the wolf women outside the house, they always look well groomed and clean and stylish. Instead of washing their blouses, shirts, or dresses, or their leather jackets, because they also like leather clothes and such, you often find them with the country folks. Yes, they have a weakness for country. That's just how it is. So before they wash their shirt or clothes, they'd rather throw it in the corner and buy a new one. That's way too much work. But their heart is good, sincere, honest, and pure. And they are enormously intuitive. They have to be sensitive to watch out in nature. Yes, and somehow fortune cookies because they really cope with every situation in their life. It's no problem for them at all. They always find a solution. They're a bit like MacGyver, the wolves. Well, let's move on to the elves. They are very fine, delicate beings. They shine like stars and are often like little dolls with very sharp contour in their faces. They are extremely light, also in body weight, rather small to medium-sized, extremely thin arms. They love trampolines, gymnastics, floating, jumping, flying, riding, dancing. And they are simply, especially as children, always happy to be in motion. They love being with animals and children and always want to help. They even magically tidy up a room in no time with their fairy dust. Or they shake an evening meal out of their sleeve or conjure a smile on your face. They manage that somehow. They can often paint enchantingly and are enormously imaginative. And in their apartments or houses, you will always find flowers. You will always find something glittering, something sparkling. By the way, it's the same with fairies. They are also glitter ladies. Yes, but they are rather quieter. Meanwhile, the elves shoot everything around them in rainbow colors, very, very imaginatively furnished. Of course, they love elf fairies, unicorns. It's unmistakable that you're dealing with an elf. So even if they seem fragile, they can defend themselves well. They're often very proud. And yes, unfortunately, they're also often weak and allow themselves to be oppressed. They are especially, and I've observed this a lot, attacked very strongly astrally. Because of this, they are weakened health-wise their entire lives. Especially kidneys, kidney meridians, root chakra are drained and they don't fully inhabit their bodies. There's always a problem with their legs because they actually float about half a meter above the ground. The feet, it's just so far to cut the toenails under those toes. Yes, they simply have to do much more for their health than others because they don't have the connection to their body. They are always far, far above the body, which is why soul food is still a very, very good way for them. And they love making soul food because they don't want to destroy plants and certainly not animals. By the way, they can't harm any animal, not even swat a mosquito. Well, maybe later in life, yes. And what's noticeable about the elves is that their friends and acquaintances they hang out with are often elves, fairies, or mermaids, or unicorns. That's a big difference from the fairy. So the big difference from the fairy is that elves are very childlike and seem eternally young. So even in their manner, they are not grown up, they don't grow up, they still have a lively child's voice at 80. And they naturally have the energy of a child when they are healthy. Otherwise, they are just weak elves. Most elves sacrifice themselves for their families. There's nothing more important than keeping their family in order. And what's typically recurring with elemental beings, their weakness is also the magicians. Often they are devoted to their magician their whole life because they don't have the strength to stand up next to him. He likes to subjugate elves, especially magicians. If there's a magician, you'll always find an elf nearby, trailing behind him, thinking it's all there is in this world. In conclusion, it should be said about the elves that they really love butterflies and everything that exists in rainbow colors. And the elves are here to comfort people, give courage, and heal their hearts. And there are also many healers among them who help. They do this with their hands. 2001, we come to the bird people. So here I can't differentiate. Of course, there are sparrows, there are eagles, there are turkeys, just everything. Yes, it's really funny, but you can see it in them. Their heads and faces strongly resemble birds. Their bodies are rather delicate, sometimes really large, depending on what bird species it is, or also small. Their noses actually look, if you look from a bit further away, like those hard things on birds. Well, of course, they love to fly, sail, surf. In doing so, they differ enormously from the waterman, the merman. They have very delicate fingers and are enormously sensitive and not really skilled in crafts because they love to fly. Accordingly, they have a weakness for dragons, or actually gliders. Being a pilot is the dream. Either you often see them settling alone their whole life, far from the thought of having a family, because they prefer to circle with their spirit over the landscapes of the earth or mountains. Just because you can fly beautifully there, especially the eagles, yes, they are touched by this height, so they have no fear of heights at all. It touches their soul deeply. So it's really noticeable that they have no fear of heights. They do the craziest things. But when talking about bird people, you have to include the canaries. Of course, the canaries are just chatterboxes. It's unbelievable. They often form nonsense clubs, or you often find them in groups where they actually sit like birds on a perch. Of course, they also like to sing, they like to chatter, they are represented in choirs. And what all bird people have in common, they often only eat and tolerate light food. They prefer to eat small amounts, but more frequently throughout the day. Carbohydrates, pasta are of course the hit or light vegetables. And really noticeable, most bird people are naturally vegans or have a preference for being vegan. The problem with bird people is that they mostly don't find meaning in their lives. Although they are enormously good seers, so also actual clairvoyants and clear thinkers. Their thoughts are free and they oversee many things at once. They are generally not interested in this matrix. They are really hard to entertain, except for maybe a few weaknesses. And there are also stars. So among the bird people, I've also seen bird people in the world of stars and celebrities, but they are rather rare among humans. They are more often alone. 2001. Their legs are long and thin, they walk strongly, their face and skin color is often pale and fair-skinned. So I haven't seen such a tanned, or as they say, brunette bird type, not that rather pale. The problem with the birdmen is that nothing can really make them happy except the air, and sports in general is actually not their thing. The mental principle, totally. Air and spirits, yes, they are smart thinkers, creative, for example, business consultants, life coaches, group advisors. Yes, so they just have a good overview of people. Yes, but, and that's 2005, also accordingly their weakness, because they are so much mentally active, they are also easy to manipulate, as they can't ground things, especially not in their own lives. For others, yes, but not for themselves. And they also have a weakness for magicians, who use them for their own purposes. And they are basically 2001 very defenseless beings, these bird people. They actually need someone by their side to protect them, which is why the paladins would actually be a good combination here. Okay. I want to briefly mention, I don't have much info on this, that there are turtles. And the only thing I have to say about it, simply due to 1000, is not to extend it any longer. No one likes turtles, although they know a lot can do a lot, but no one likes them. I can't tell you what that has to do with. Of course, there are also frogs. They are always slimy, fat, and unkempt. And yes, they really look like frogs. You can see it in their double chin. What else is there? There are, of course, an enormous number of fishman species. You can see it in their feet. They go outward, the feet, and so flat foot, fallen arch, everything, and huge fins down there. So they don't walk, but they have fins. Of course, there are also seals. There are centaurs, about which I will not say anything further for now. Of course, reptiles, snake insectoids, and maybe another time. Let's move on. 1000 to the Amazons. The Amazons are true natural beauties, women power, similar to the mermaid. They are hard to distinguish actually only by these now coming other characteristics. The Amazons often form workshops for women. They are complete. They can also live completely without a man. Men, so that's the difference to the mermaids. They don't give a damn about men. They are total immanence. From their point of view, the world can be without men. So that's not important. They often run gyms or do workouts in nature, hikes with action, adventure. And of course, you'll always find a bow and arrow or a crossbow at an Amazon's home. But sometimes other types of weapons too. Weapons in general are no problem for them. They are a walking weapon themselves. Their bodies are strong, powerful, energetic, ambitious. You'll also find them in martial arts. Yes, they are questioning, creative in their traits, and they always develop good strategies, often against men. However, they also go to protest for their children and families, so into battle. Yes, they are often parent representatives for oppressed groups or people. You'll find them as judges, lawyers, healers, health experts, fitness consultants, bodybuilders, or generally successful businesswomen. They are usually self-employed. They would never submit to anyone. That's just undignified. An Amazon would rather do nothing and stomp on the street than let someone else tell them what to do. Yes, and without doing anything for it, men are always at their feet. You always have a man kissing their feet. However they do it, it's in their aura. They are never alone, even though they don't need to be. And they have an aphrodisiac effect on men, strong, attractive through an enormous feminine power they use. So you find a lot of magic. And they use, and this is also a weakness of the Amazons, often shamanic work. Shamanic healing methods, witchcraft and magic are not far-fetched. And they have these programs to save the world, always saving or freeing someone from something. It's about that their whole life. Well, and of course, they often suppress their men and families because they would never question themselves. They absolutely do not give up their value. They are emancipated and generally only trust women. They have many female friends around them and love doing women's things. Of course, cosmetics is their weakness, and they love being beautiful, but for themselves, not for men or to be hit on. But when it comes to cosmetics for Amazons, it's natural cosmetics, of course. Okay, then we have the unicorns. Unicorns are extremely rare. They are the rarest of all I have here. They are extremely shy, hypersensitive. And yes, you can't really say, it's more like unicorns trust animals more than humans. They can't find their way in the human world. It's a disaster. They often live far away from the human world, in lonely forest huts, or would like to be in the middle of the forest where no one else is except a few. They really shy away from any contact with people, are always alone, and can't stand any noise made by matter. They are so sensitive in their nervous system that unrest and hectic can really make them sick. They are physically unstable and also extremely emotional. And they have lost all trust in people from birth. They always feel misunderstood and alien in this world, always wrapped in deep sadness and loneliness in their aura. And they have very strong psychic abilities they could use to help others. But they drown in self-pity and are really lonely until the end of their lives. And the problem is also that they can't return to this matrix without a strong partner by their side. It has to do with their weakness, with not accepting this body. And that's why I've seen many unicorns attract violent men, sadists, brutes. I wonder what the unicorns are doing there, but they really attract the most impossible stuff because they need this strong grounding force, and because they can't cope with this. They are often really nourished by them. They have a few children and then get support for life. Of course, they separate from them, but they are always victims and deeply unhappy. And their children are often fairies. And what unicorns, of course, I really have to say, at the end love most are horses. Yes, horses are their healing. Bringing unicorns among horses is therapy to the last level. So I know some unicorns, but many are mentally and spiritually very, very ill, especially in old age. So let's move on to druids. Druids are extreme hermit crabs and live their whole life without partnership because they simply have little interest in connections with the opposite sex. They are actually androgynous even in their consciousness. They also have a really strange defense in their aura. So it's like you find them strange, creepy, you find them repulsive, but they do it consciously. They just don't want you to talk to them, to find them. Spooky. And of course, they love hooded robes, like to dress like druids, and often have beards, long beards. And they actually need and live in deep nature, preferably in a lonely mountain hut. They are skilled craftsmen, speak with trees from childhood. They also love tree houses or round houses, but have a weakness for anthroposophy, magical rituals, and study books and ancient writings all their lives. So if you enter such a druid's house, it's full of books. That's more important than cups in the cupboard or cutlery or something. That's all important. So a bowl, a spoon, a cup is enough for a druid. Runes and healing work, herbal medicine, a clear case. They know every herbal healing plant and what they bring without having to learn it anew in this life. They have an extreme amount of magical knowledge and can unfortunately also slip to the dark side. They are often desperate about the meaning of life their whole life, and if they come to a partnership or then to a child, then it's a kind of random principle. They just catch a partner, but that's not really their purpose. And often they are separated again right away because they just can't stand it with another person who is just too dumb for them. And they are usually lonely. They can't connect with others or empathize with each other. They only see their world, and yes, they don't give themselves up for someone else. What I've noticed is that they often have gray hair at a young age, sometimes from 40, which is physiologically just an absurdity. Yes, they have a strong attraction to Native Americans or indigenous peoples. That must also be said. When they die, they connect with trees and know from an early age, from their childhood, that life is an illusion and don't live in this world. They simply don't accept anything and are a bit sad at least. One thinks so. I can't look into it. They are also a bit like magicians in robes, yes. But they are definitely not here to live their heart, or happiness has no meaning or purpose for them, although they all somehow longed for it, those I have met. The only problem is nobody really likes druids. So let's move on to dwarves. Dwarves are very dissatisfied, toxic people. Short statured, just like you know from movies or fairy tales, and really in every second word. They know everything better. They are mentally strongly confined, constantly under pressure, under performance pressure, under thought pressure. They have to prove to themselves and the world that they are right. And they love fairies and elves, although reaching the heart of dwarves is difficult because if you reach it, they would never show or allow it because they are in an eternal struggle. Everything is evil. The world, politics, everything is crap. There can't simply be good. They are completely negative, although they are smart. And it's really hard to convince them that there are also parallel good things happening. And what they absolutely love to do, they love to trade and make deals, just like goblins. And they mostly come to nothing and are always financially at the limit and in need. They love to do things secretly. Yes, dwarves love to do things secretly, whether it's eating ice cream or their little plate. They are so secretive, they just don't want anyone to see. No one should know that they can secretly feel happiness because they can enjoy, yes, but they would never admit it. And what they are endlessly stingy, although often when they have been well gifted by the universe. Yes, in this matrix, there is no reason for it. They are always stingy, they don't grant anything to others. Yes, dwarves among themselves have dark humor and misogynistic traits. And yes, they are schadenfreude, yes. And I've seen dwarf women who often really maliciously laugh at others when they get hurt. Yes, these dwarves are really a peculiar bunch, but among themselves, yes, they often have a feeling of hate and anger. So at a small thing, if they stumble or something, they start cursing. So that's another thing, yeah. And what they absolutely can't stand is criticism. Oh, they'll go for your throat if you mention criticism to the dwarves. Yeah, you probably know dwarves show up regularly. There's a dwarf in every apartment block. That's just how it is. Let's move on to giants, the opposite of dwarves. These are lanky, very tall people who just don't know what to do with their bodies. And they slouch, their arms hang down, and it really looks funny. They are truly very tall people. I'm not talking about 5'11", but actually taller. Giants are hard to understand when you talk to them because they seem to live in another dimension. They think and feel in another dimension and have a hard time connecting with their bodies. It's like everything is far away, and they are extremely slow. They take forever to sit at the table or set down a bowl. Yeah, and they can't understand why we make such a fuss down here, why we're so restless, why we have all the time in the world. Yeah, you have all the time. The day is endless, and they actually live in a space and time, or rather without space and time. They are very peaceful and only seek love and connection. And the amazing thing is they have an incredibly big heart. I've never met people who can listen so patiently. And yes, they tolerate everything, they put up with everything, but what I've felt is that they do this because they don't want to be alone. They want some purpose, and somehow it's more like entertainment for them. The problem with giants is that they suppress themselves. Even though they have a big heart, they always want to serve somehow. If they manage to find something they can be very valuable to this earth, yeah, then they really thrive in it. And the beautiful thing about giants is that very simple things can bring them joy. And if it's a little flower that fell at your feet on your path, it makes them incredibly happy that you thought of them and brought them this little flower. Moreover, giants are the best listeners ever. They wouldn't take sides or talk you out of anything. So if you're stressed and need to get something off your chest, go to a giant and they'll remain completely unburdened in their aura. It doesn't bother them at all. They could listen to you for years. However, talking is very difficult for giants. They can only come to big cities if their loneliness becomes unbearable. There are so few, and one giant in their life is enough, and they are very lucky. They never part again. Giants love giants, that's the only thing. There are no other interests. They want to feel and often show that if they haven't found a giant, they let themselves be caught by the matrix, anesthetized, as if to punish themselves, like if you're already miserable on this earth, then let yourself be put to sleep. What I've seen is that there are always goblins near giants. The goblins and dwarves often exploit these giants because they themselves would like to have such a body size. Moreover, giants bring joy to dwarves and goblins. They like that they're not alone. In general, it's also worth mentioning that all elemental beings like each other. You always find connections in the circle of friends to elves, fairies in the family where they are incarnated rather rarely. Alright, let's move on to the last ones, the elves. But there's still a lot I have to say. So I haven't made any subcategories here, but I'm mixing all the elves together and not counting them. So I'm listing them together but not going into individual characteristics. I'd have to add another hour for that. So there are tree elves, a whole lot of different elves. There are leaf elves, flower elves, fruit elves, forest elves, meadow elves, mountain elves, animal elves, earth elves, water elves, ice elves, and so on. When they are incarnated in human bodies, you can always see that they have a special shape. Their ears, also their eyebrows, and their entire pointed facial expression gives them away. Often they are really beautiful people, but different. They look very well groomed, even though they don't have to do much for their health or beauty. They love lush nature and deserted places. They love streams, the sound of rain, the breeze, just listening to the breeze. They can enjoy a dewdrop or an icicle or flower blossoms, just a single flower blossom. Or they smell a blossom and enter other worlds. It doesn't matter what else happens that day. If they've seen a flower bloom, the day is complete for them. They love autumn and the colors you can see in autumn. They love the scent of the forest, of first of moss. Yes, there are also moss elves. The silence. And they especially love like-minded people of their kind. They are rarely alone. They are peaceful, extremely peaceful beings, and they don't like to get into conflicts with others. And before they express their opinion or defend themselves, they prefer to swallow the malice of their counterpart, which often drives their counterpart crazy. They have a green thumb and often just need to look at a plant and it thrives again. It blooms and heals. Sometimes they buy broken plants out of pity at the garden market to heal them at home. They love flower meadows and would love to sleep in them. They love moss, fir trees, deciduous trees, mushrooms. Yes, and these trees, they feel protected and sheltered there. They would love to move into a tree and build a tree house, all in the spirit of nature. They are also very knowledgeable about plant schools and tree nurseries. They know everything about plants, and this knowledge comes naturally to them. They also know about phytotherapy or plant medicine. That's why you often find them in the healing scene. And they heal with their hands and their heart. You'll recognize them by the fact that they have many plants and flowers around them and tend to them actively, like others clean their cars. Even in new apartments, the balcony overflows with plants, making you wonder where you can still walk. They are everywhere and often turn against people, attacking them, which no one can understand if they have no heart for their nature or their plants. And when that happens, when they have become corrupted, they can actually become malicious beings because they have closed their hearts forever. When I've encountered them, they are often angry and full of frustration because their work is not appreciated. And internally, they actually use their creative power destructively, diabolically, and divisively. And they simply hate people who treat everything carelessly because they have worked in vain in nature. And often from a matrix perspective, they are simply impossible to satisfy. But as I said, not every type of elf is corrupted, but they do exist. So you should know that among the elves there are actually tinker elves. So tinkerers, loners, scientists, and researchers. I really want to recommend that you watch the Tinkerbell movies, all of them. There's so much knowledge and truth in them, especially my favorite movie, Epic. Incredibly well done and very, very many original events, and also Lord of the Rings. Those are even the original earthly languages and so on. Yes, the things present that you need to perhaps recognize it later in people or in yourself. And that, yes, indeed, people can really reject and only accept their own kind. And what you should also know is that elves love very differently than humans. When you're Near elves, in their presence, you forget space and time. Just like with fairies. Fairies are basically the queens of the elves. This is also shown in the movie Epic. There's one shown who dies where they all fought or tried to protect her. And the elves, while they live physically in this world, their consciousness always resides in another dimension, and they also work from that other dimension. They draw their energy from there and can easily create soul food because they are not bound or attached to this world like all other elemental beings, even if they would realign their consciousness. Yes, many elemental beings are unfortunately trapped in the matrix and can't maintain their other world as easily as elves. Elves help each other and look out for one another. They are even capable of being revolutionary together in consciousness and would die for peace in this world, going to war together. Each elf possesses special abilities and always has the subtle help of their soul siblings who live in parallel in other dimensions and accompany them throughout their lives. The elves incarnated here are the strongest and most stable of their kind and are sent as voluntary thousands. Elves have a weakness for fairies when it comes to partnership, love, and passion. But fairies don't care about them, which is often their sorrow. That's usually the case. But elves and fairies can give each other strength, can create space-time portals together, very useful, serve other people 2001, and heal and change the world if they would pull themselves together and not be so selfish with pure neutrino energy. They are often too isolated, and as mentioned, they are degenerate. They need to find each other again and serve unity and work together with unity. And finally, about the elves, they have delicate and slender bodies, are good climbers. The tree elves, for example, came to mind. They are tree climbers. And if a tree is felled near a tree elf, it can even be that the elf dies or becomes ill because they are so strongly connected to nature and their surroundings. They must then move away. So they have to give up their workplace if trees are felled there because they hear the tree's pain screaming for weeks. And yes, it can actually destroy them because they are anchored in it. Well, I'm going to stop for today. It's an incredibly long topic. It's a lot. I could have written for hours because there's so much more. But these are the classic beings incarnated here. Should give you orientation. 2001 gives strength, give courage. And if you have questions about it, just write them in our Telegram channel. You can find the contact on our homepage under the unspecified. And then I might be able to add 1, 2, 3 important pieces of information. And if it gets too much, I might make another video, part 2. Pura Vida from Costa Rica, the land of elves and fairies and rainbows.